Welcome back to the Week in Review. Joining me now is Councilman Michael Feinstein from Santa Monica. Good to have you, Michael.
Good to be here.
And also on my other side here is Robert Sulnick, who's the Executive Director of the American Oceans Campaign. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Jerry Chaliff, we were just talking in the break, a little follow-up, Jerry, on the Merritt Bob report. And what were you saying?
What I was saying was the reason I brought up the assignment issue was that one of the problems that happens is you get new deputies, they come in, they're trained, and the first assignment they get is the jail, and they spend 5 years in the jail, and in fact they're sentenced to the jail too, and they develop a perspective that people are basically bad and not somebody to how they want to deal. They become acculturated to how their job is supposed to be, and it tends to make them more brutal or less understanding. And so that whenever they get out there and they get back on the street, it's harder for them to deal with people. And it becomes a problem on the other end, although David doesn't think there is one, of brutality or how you deal with the public. And you can't have an effective police force that doesn't have public cooperation. And if you have somebody come out of the jail who's sort of hardened to human nature and is cynical already, it's going to make them that much harder to deal with the people in the streets and have them deal with him or her.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And let's get with you, Michael. Switching gears completely to the whole great world, the great earth we live in. You put an alarming headline that Mary actually wrote in the Outlook that grabbed my attention on global warming. Tell us about it.
Yeah, actually the Santa Monica City Council, at my behest, just passed a motion to have our city start to compile information to plan for how global warming is going to affect us. The fact is, global warming is already here. The last 100 years have been the hottest in the last 1,000. The 10 hottest years since 1860 have been in the last 15 years. We're also seeing climate change happening the fastest in the last 10,000 years. Now, what's predicted is not only are things going to get warmer and warmer, but climate is going to become more unstable. More droughts, more floods, rain at the wrong time, snow at the wrong time, weather at the wrong time, and then all the attendant environmental consequences. Basically, our environment is our foundation. Once that starts to shift, everything shifts.
Okay, what's causing this, and what can we do about it?
And what's causing it essentially is the burning of fossil fuels going up into our atmosphere. The greenhouse means we have a protective layer on the top of our environment. When solar energy comes in, normally a portion of it leaves. Now what's happening is more and more heat is staying within, so it's getting hotter and hotter. What we do is we change the way we use energy. We start by becoming much more efficient. We can become much more efficient than we are now. Then we switch to renewable fuels, solar, geothermal, hydrogen, etc., biomass. There are all kinds of renewable fuels. The technologies are here. It's really a political question, not an environmental or scientific.
Saying it's a political question, I've been hearing the scream, not from you, but from others for a long time now. Nobody seems to be listening.
Well, one of the great things, look at, as you know, I'm an elected member of the Green Party. Green-thinking people for years have been saying this sort of thing. What we always figure is the diminishing returns ultimately will come back. The world's major insurance companies now are refusing to insure for environmental disasters because they now realize the bottom line means their profits. So, fortunately, there's a growing constituency to make change. We're trying to push our federal government to make change. On a local level in Santa Monica, we're doing a lot. It's a political process, and I believe that ultimately you need more people to run on these things and get elected in order to move the government.
How do you feel about what he just said? Is he playing Chicken Little and the sky's caving down, or is this real?
I'm glad you asked. Oh, unequivocally it's real. The entire U.S. delegation says it's real. The only question that most of the governments of the world are arguing about is when they will commit to reductions and how much the reductions will be and what point in time they will do it. But just to back up what Michael was saying, there's two really interesting things that are happening right now that suggest that there might be a way to resolve this problem in future generations. One is the EV1, the electric car that Saturn put out.
Yes.
I think that they're coming out with that technology is very exciting. And the other is British Petroleum will make an announcement on Monday that they are now the second largest holder of solar technology in the world. And a big part of their interest in solar technology is climate change. And so if you see these major industrial infrastructure beginning to come online in a problem-solving context, then I think there's hope to solve problems like this. And what it will require ultimately is a paradigm shift in the environmental movement. I mean, environmental movement has always been them against us. Well, that's not going to work anymore. There is no them. Never works. It's not going to work anymore. But if we could create a paradigm that agrees to disagree on X, but agrees to agree on Y, and help these infrastructures come online with tax credits and just media acceptance, we can solve these problems.
What do you think of the air quality management district and its functioning and how it's been dealing with the air quality here in Southern California?
I think air quality in Southern California is just a horrible problem. I mean, it is. We have such a committed lifestyle to producing air pollution, and no fault attributed to it. I mean, we are, you know, what are there, 12 million of us in the basin? We're all committing lifestyles that are committed to toxic waste that equals air pollution. And I think that until you actually deal with the underlying fundamental problem of how you approach that kind of lifestyle change and create these kinds of infrastructure shifts, you're not going to solve that problem. You're just going to quarrel about it.
Tell me what is the American Oceans Campaign?
Well, we're a nonprofit advocacy group that is dealing with restoration, preservation of coastal ecosystems, essentially. We're headquartered in Santa Monica. We have a national office in Washington, D.C. We're a leader in Clean Water Act reauthorization. We're involved in tuna dolphin. We do research on toxic waste in the marine environment. We make films, and we work with the private sector.
Now, you did something in Orange County, the Bologna Chica, is that it?
Bolsa Chica.
Bolsa Chica, explain that.
That was really interesting. California's lost 91% of its wetlands. We have very few left. And the Bolsa Chica wetlands is the jewel of what remains in our wetland system. The state has about 300 acres that are restored there. The Coal Real Estate Company received a permit from the Coastal Commission to develop 800 homes in that low-lying area that abuts the wetlands. We sued and said that under the Coastal Act that was inappropriate. But in the context of negotiations, we worked out a solution where the state of California bought the wetlands from coal, and the federal and state governments have agreed to restore them to a functioning system. So we will now have 900 acres of additional wetlands added to 300. So there's a net win for future generations of 1,200 acres of wetlands. What I liked about that process is everybody had to cooperate. You had 8 state and federal agencies that did not want to cooperate. You had a developer that did not want to cooperate, and you had an environmental community that did not want to cooperate. But the act of bringing them all together was a win-win for the next generation and for all that wildlife that depends on wetlands.
This is the Michael Feinstein politics. Jerry?
Well, I had a question when we were talking about the pollution. Was the LA Times was a story last week that Los Angeles air is so much better. And then you go downtown when I have an office now and you look out the window and it's smoggy and everybody tells you it's now fog. Does that kind of story hurt what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, you know, you talk about our air here. We have Air Quality Management District that is pursuing a policy which we think is asinine in the Green Party. The idea of buying and selling pollution, the reclaimed pollution credit system, is entirely the wrong approach from our perspective. The idea that, well, if there's some savings somewhere here, another company can buy those savings and stop from decreasing their pollution, and since usually the polluters are in the lowest income, usually ethnic neighborhoods, it's a social justice issue as well. As a Green Party, what we think should happen is a true cost pricing system where the real environmental costs of goods and services and pollution are attached to them, so that to pollute becomes uneconomical, to do the right thing is. When you talk about working with the business community, the problem is right now it's often expensive for them to do the right thing. We want to make it easier to do the right thing.
Mary?
Well, I just want to get back actually to Michael's motion the other night. What you actually passed was a motion to look at what the future impacts of global warming could be on Santa Monica. And it brought up this whole question about how much resources one expends now to prepare oneself for the future. Do we spend the money and the staff time on trying to prevent it, or do we spend the money and city staff time on preparing ourselves for the worst? I'd like to hear what you have to say about that kind of issue. Is it now or in the future?
Well, you know, what we're doing now, I think, is really a fiscal and public health and risk management move. Any business looks ahead. Where are you going to be in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I think as a city, we need to be doing the same thing. We make a ton of money on tourism. Our beaches are enormously valuable. What the island nations in the Caribbean and in the Indian Ocean are already finding, now that the storms are more severe and more frequent, is they're losing their beaches. So we're talking, for example, about having a breakwater in the bay. We want to make sure that that breakwater, when it goes in, protects us as best as possible. We need to learn what sort of climate modeling will happen.
But the point is, couldn't you spend the money on trying to prevent things from happening so you don't have to prepare for certain things?
Local governments and grassroots organizations and citizens are going to have to get involved at the federal level of expressing their opinion and lobbying, because it's nations that are going to move global warming. You can build all the breakwaters you want, but that isn't going to respond to the problem. And I mean, so city councils like Santa Monica and Los Angeles, I think, should be involved in the dialogue of talking to their federal elected representatives, to the president, to state senators, to United States senators, about the need to address global warming as a serious political issue, and not to keep trying to finesse it. You know, we keep finessing it. We say now our delegation says it's real, the science is clear, but we really ought to talk about how long it takes to reduce, you know, the fossil fuel emissions.
David?
Yeah, well, forgive me, but this sounds to me like crackpot science and crackpot.
It's really not crackpot.
Just a second,
at
and
all.
crackpot politics.
Hey, crackpot, that's
There is
silly.
the verdict is way out on global warming, except in certain politically correct circles. And the idea, the lunatic idea, that a city, and here I'm agreeing with Mary, that a city like Santa Monica is going to, plan the future, lead the way for the future, when you have people defecating on the street. I mean, you talk about tourism. You can't walk on the promenade without being accosted by psychos, homeless psychopaths.
Well, David,
who menace women and children. And here you are.
The only thing wrong with your statement is the characterization of
excuse your wetlands thing is holding up
crackpot.
the DreamWorks project. I mean, you talk about people, 11,000 jobs.
No, excuse me. DreamWorks has nothing to do with Bolsa Chica. They're entirely,
I understand that.
One's in Orange County,
Listen, I've read
one's
your
in LA
literature.
County.
You want these stringent
Guys,
wetlands rules,
let me just jump in
which
because that's
already
locally. Trying to deal, obviously, we have to make change on the governmental level. So trying to prevent global warming from happening, obviously, state, federal, international. It doesn't preclude us in Santa Monica also looking to how it's going to affect us locally, because it's already in place. And again, David, major bottom line insurance companies do not insure for environmental disaster anymore because they know it's here. So the point is, we also try to take care of ourselves locally while we help to change the big picture.
Sign on to your
you really
extremist environmentalism, and that's the reason.
Uninformed,
we've been hit.
Excuse me. Uninformed name-calling is really not a good way to have a debate. It might be entertaining. The only nations in the world...
I don't think it's crackpot for
No,
a
I
little
want to
city like
finish.
Santa
I'd
Monica
really like to finish.
try to stake out a claim
Well,
on the global warming.
You may not want me to finish,
Please.
but why don't I just finish? The only nations in the world that say that global warming is not real are the OPEC nations and Russia. The rest of the nations, the rest of the nations in the world all say it's quite real, quite serious, and needs to be addressed. So you can't say crackpot. That's ridiculous.
Okay. That's it.
Sorry.
Our hour's up. Unfortunately, we have to deal with the real time on that, too. I want to thank you, Michael, very much for coming on. I want to thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with me. I want to thank my panel for being with me during this hour.
And we want to say happy day after your birthday.
Thank you very much for that. And I especially want to thank you out there for sharing your time with us. God bless you, and bye-bye.